First, I want to welcome this gentleman here to the right or to the left of me, depending upon which way your camera's facing here. His name is Yogi Goswami, and he is a freight broker. He has his own freight broker authority. He's a licensed freight broker. And, we're going to talk today about his journey from startup, having very little experience or knowledge in and around the freight logistics industry, to what he was able to accomplish last year in 2019, which is when he did over $4.8 million in sales as a broker. So welcome to the show, Yogi.
Thank you for having me, Dennis.
Yeah, thank you. I'm so excited because you and I have known each other from a distance for several years, right?
Yeah.
I think you took my course started maybe in 2017 or 2018, somewhere around there. Yeah, and you were very early in the business and you were learning a lot. And what's really cool is that you're one of the few that actually put it to work, right? You put it to work. We were talking before we jumped online, and we were talking about how a lot of people want to have a successful business, and they have these goals of making money and retiring early and taking care of their kids and paying for their daughters' weddings and all these big goals. But what they lack in a lot of cases is taking action and having the intestinal fortitude to make it through those first 6 months, which is obviously the most difficult. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your startup journey? Why did you pick freight brokerage? And first of all, tell everybody where you're logging in from.
All right. So I'm logging in from a small part in India. It's in Goa, India. So GOA, Goa, India.
Goa, India. Just so you guys know, runs his entire brokerage from Goa, India. All of his staff is in India. So he's doing this remote. Number one, he's never been to the U.S., correct?
Never
been to the U.S., had no experience. And he started his freight brokerage from Goa, India, and now did $4.8 million last year. So that adds a whole nother element to this. So when people say, oh, yeah, but I have an accent, or I don't have perfect English, or I live in this other part of the country, I get it. It's easy to make excuses. It's easy to point to those things because those are easy things to let yourself off the hook. But the fact is that isn't the reason why you're probably not where you want to be. And so hopefully Yogi's going to be able to inspire you a little bit with what he's done. So you're in India. Tell us a little bit about your startup. Like, why did you pick freight brokerage?
All right. So I'll go a little back. Okay. Before getting into brokerage, I was involved in insurance company, a commercial truck insurance company. So I was working with that company for 5 years. That's where I learned, about insurance, about coverages, to how to add a truck or trailer onto the policy, how to add drivers on the policy, what to do during the insurance claim. So that's where I got little information about the trucking, transportation, logistic. And I was very fascinated because every now and then I'll get certificate requests from brokers like Coyote, TQL, asking for the certificate of, insurance. And I started asking questions, what they do, what is freight brokerage? And one of the conversation, I met one of the founders, the founders of the company, and they asked me a simple question that you run insurance agencies from India. Would you be interested to do brokerage? And I said, yeah, why not? I'll be interested to do it. And that's when we started researching about how we can start a brokerage from India or do it remotely from India. What licenses do we need? And the first course that we took was Freight Broker Bootcamp. Okay. Trust me, I'll tell you, the reason why we took it was, first, it's it's not expensive. Okay. Easy to learn. And as we went through with the program, we learned that the amount of information involved in that course, was critical to our business. And that's when, I think when I was in the course, I moved my first load, okay, and I made $400 margin. I texted you, that Dennis, I moved my first load.
I remember that.
Yeah, so that first load, okay, pumped up the spirits of everyone in the company that, we can do it.
Yep.
And 2018, we focus, what we do is temperature controlled freight. So 99% of our business is produce. which is it's very difficult, in the brokerage or in the transportation world. It's difficult. It's very difficult. You have to be very sure. You have to make sure that everything is correct on the documentation, the way the load is loaded. Everything should be correct. We have 5 agents now. 2 are full time, and 3 are new agents that learning the business. 1 accounting and 1 compliance team. Last year we did 4.8 million, over 700,000 in profits. This year has been slow because of COVID, but we are hoping that we will be anywhere between $3 to $4 million. Okay.
Yeah, in a down year. So here, just so you guys know, remember, he's located in India. His staff, his agents are in India. All of his team is in India. They have to deal with how much is the time disparity? What is it, 12 hours?
We work 9 hours here.
So what hours do you normally work? You work normal US time, right?
Yes. So I actually start working East Coast. Okay. So we start in India, we start at 7 p.m. and we work till 4 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah. So see some of the obstacles the extra obstacles that he has to go through, him and his team have to go through in order to have a successful business. That's the dedication. That's the difference between people that succeed. And I don't care if it's in the freight industry or what industry it is. The people that are willing to remove those obstacles and focus on the solutions and just get busy and get to work. I remember when he texted me and said he made his first $400. Yeah, I mean, the confidence that you were able to get from that and the confidence that your team was able to get from that. I just got chills because I remember my first load. I remember moving my first load. I remember exactly who the customer is. I remember what it was. I remember how we didn't even make $400. I think we made like $100 on the load. It was peanuts, but it was such a confidence builder. So I'm so happy for you. I'm proud of you that you took action, and to the victors goes the spoils, because you're doing extremely well. And I know, yeah, of course, it's a little bit of a down year, but things are going to recover quickly. And I think you're already starting to see some of that. So,
yeah, I'm starting to see recovery now.
Yeah, good. All right, so you've got 2 experienced agents, you got some new agents, you have a compliance person. They're all in India, and you focus in your niche is produce and temperature control. Let's talk about that for a minute. Why did you choose produce? What was it that drew you to produce?
Because when I was doing insurance, okay, most of my customers, they did produce. Okay, so that's when the only industry I knew was produce, and the second reason is produce pay you well. Compared to, like, if you don't go to heavy haul, if you compare dry and produce, you can make money.
Yeah. So 2 things. Observe, listen, pay attention to what he just said. He did what he knew. He knew he had some experience and knowledge in and around produce. So that's where he started. He didn't just go off on some random tangent and say, hey, I'm going to move bottled beverages, even though I have no experience in it. I'm not saying that you can't do that, but he started his discovery of what his niche was going to be by what he knew. Okay. So if you're a truck driver who's been doing heavy haul for 20 years and you decide you want to open a brokerage, don't go into van freight. Focus on heavy haul. You know that business. So it's a parallel, right? So it's the same sort of thing. That's number 1. Number 2, he looked at and did enough discovery and research and educated himself about the margins. Margins have a tendency to be higher in reefer and particularly in produce. Why? Because it's a perishable product, right? It's much more sensitive. Now, pros and cons, right? There's a lot more nuances. There's typically more claims than van loads and just traditional flatbed loads. But you also are able to make more money. So he took a very simple approach. And you have heard me ad nauseum talk about niching down. Riches are in the niches. Find your niche. I'm not saying you can't expand beyond your niche, but you got to start with a niche. And produce is a great niche, but the devil's in the detail, right? You got to be very careful because, again, you have a load of strawberries go bad on you in the middle of a transit because of some sort of breakdown, or the reefer breaks down or whatever, or temperature's off. You got a $50,000, $60,000 claim, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, boom, that's gonna be an issue. So definitely pay close attention to that. Educate yourself. All right, cool. So that's why you chose produce. All right. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Tell us a little bit about why you chose the agent business model. So you had two options. You could have chosen, hey, I'm going to bring everybody in and I'm going to pay them a salary or an hourly, and they're going to work in my facility, and we're going to build an inside sales team. But you chose to take the agent model. Why did you choose that route? Explain that to me.
First, as a startup, the first focus is to keep the operations cost down. I don't want to pay salaries, for people who have not shown me progress. And secondly, to have a team in India where I know nobody knows about logistics and freight brokerage, it doesn't make sense for me to offer them salaries straight up. I will train them. Let's start with the agent model. And if your book of business is good enough for me to give you salary and commission, it makes sense.
Yeah, and so you chose the agent model, but you have an interesting situation because in India, where you live, there's very few people that understand what a freight broker is. I mean, trust me, there's not very many people in the United States that even know what a freight broker is until they read a little bit about it. I know it's even less in India. So trying to recruit experienced agents has to be challenging, right? People that have a book of business got to be very challenging. They're probably almost non-existent. So you have to take people who have no book or have just very limited experience, and you have to train them. That's a difficult process.
People that I've hired have no experience in logistics. That's the first thing. So what I look at, when I hire somebody, what are the things that I look at? The first thing is desire to succeed. Okay. If they don't have desire, or if they have, for example, I told you earlier, if I'm hiring somebody and if they have a plan B, if they fail at this, if they have a plan B, I don't hire them. So I need before knowledge, you need to have a desire to learn and succeed. If you don't have the desire, no matter how much knowledge I give you, you will not take that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's amazing. You even said you go so far as to specifically ask them the question, if you don't succeed at this, what will you do next? And if they tell you their plan B is to do something, you don't hire them because they're looking for a plan B. You want people that are all in, fully committed to learning and investing themselves in the process. Now that in itself doesn't guarantee success, but I would say statistically speaking, it dramatically increases the likelihood that they can be successful, right? Yeah. So I think that's really interesting. I love the fact that you asked them that question during the interview, and that it's really a non-negotiable for you. If they say, hey, I'm going to go work with my cousin, if this doesn't work out, say, hey, just go work with your cousin, man, because this isn't going to work.
There's another thing I want to add. What I believe that knowledge, industry experience will come with time, but you need to have desire. I'll tell you a story. I have two agents, two successful agents. One of the agent, that I've hired, he's a qualified chef. He's a chef by profession. He met with an accident, and right now he does not have, his right arm doesn't move. His right hand does not move. He only has one hand. Okay, so he has only one hand. He sits on the computer, make cold calls, email people with just one hand. And last month, he did $12,000 in profit. This month, he's already at $6,000 in profit. Last year, he did $1.1 million in gross revenue. So you need to have desire. If you don't have desire, no matter how much I try, no matter how much you try, Dennis, they will not succeed. They need to have desire.
It's amazing. It's funny because I quoted Tony Robbins the other day in a conversation. I don't know if it was a podcast, on my Growth Experts podcast, or it was a live, and it went like this. It was like, the reason why people fail has nothing to do with the lack of resources. It has to do with the lack of resourcefulness, right? Yeah. And so that brings me to that example, right? This guy had met with a horrible accident, doesn't have use of one arm. He speaks, he's not from the United States, so he speaks slightly broken English, probably something with an accent, right? I don't know. You have great English, right? I mean, you do really well. And so, but yet he's sitting here making phone calls and emailing and cold calling and built $1 million book, and he converted, and he's probably making more money than he's ever made in his life compared to being a chef, right? Yeah. Now he's completely gotten outside of his comfort zone and turned his entire life around. I mean, that's amazing. I absolutely love that story. That's awesome.
So this is what I do. Okay, so when I hire when I take interviews, I tell them, this is the example I have in front of you. Okay, And if you still have plan B, you're not excited to achieve this in your life, and you have plan B, I don't need you.
And some people, and that's okay. And there's probably people listening to this right now that don't necessarily agree with that. But here's what I can tell you. I'm going to relate it back to my own story. I started my freight brokerage back in 2003. Okay. I incorporated the business October 3rd, 2003. I had gotten married September 27th, 2003. 6 days earlier, I got married. I was broke. I was behind on all my bills. I had no money. I didn't have a choice as to whether I was going to make this work or not. It was, it's going to work, hell or high water. I'm going to figure it out. And so I went to work, and yeah, they were long days. It sucked. I remember being the first person in the office at 6 o'clock to open up and leaving at times at 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening. It was 12, 14-hour days, and it was tough the first year. But much like you and much like, your agent, it does get easier, but you got to front load the work and the effort, and that desire has got to be there. You have to be all in, right? You were all in. He was all in. I was all in. Other people that have taken my class that have built 7-figure businesses and entrepreneurs around the world, I think they would all agree that you've got to be all in. So I love that point. I think that's really, really a critical point. If all you took away from this today, if everybody watching this took away today that piece, which is couple things already. Number one, you have to educate yourself. He did not, he modeled people who have already done what he was looking to do before he did it. He took my course. He probably took other courses. He read, he listened, he watched videos, he immersed himself, and he learned the basic fundamentals. And then he took action and he moved that first load. And then all he did was wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, wash, rinse, repeat, right? And it's gotten him to the point where now he has almost a $5 million business. So, all right. So listen, here's a question for you, because this is an excuse I get all the time from people, whether they be in the US or abroad. Cold calling. How do you get most of your clients? How have you gotten most of your clients to this point?
Cold call.
Cold calls. So tell me, give me a very basic fundamental example of what your cold call consists of. When you teach a brand new agent to do a cold call, give me a very basic layout of what that cold call says. And just so you guys know, I think you're going to be surprised, because there's no magic script. There's no perfect words. That doesn't exist, right? The key is you have to have a system that you use, and you have to put it to work over an extended period of time. So tell us a little bit about how the cold calls work.
I'll give you one of the scripts that we use over here.
Yeah, sure.
So we are a member of, Blue Book. Okay?
Yeah.
And what we do is, we try to reach shippers, and we start off saying, this is Yogi from Binning. I'm a fellow Blue Book member. We are trying to reach. But before doing that, what we do is we see if there's an article, or if the company is in news. That's something I've learned from you. Okay, if the company is in news, and for example, Well-Picked, a strawberry company. Okay, they are launching a new packaging. Okay, so most of these news are given by the VP of the company, or VP of marketing, VP of sales. Okay, so they have their name and the designation. Okay. So what I do is, or what everybody does here is, when we call them, we get this into a conversation, saying that, okay, we are fellow Blue Book member. We read an article today. Congratulations on the new packaging, and we talk about business. We ask good questions. Okay, we ask questions like, okay, what do you think the business is going to grow? Or where do you move? Where do you move your shipment? Basically, is it inbound, outbound? So we ask them questions.
Right.
So that's what we do. Yeah.
So note one thing. Okay. When he first started, it probably was very. It was a little bit mechanical, and it felt a little bit uncomfortable. And the people on the other end probably sensed it. But he did it enough, and he did it enough times, and enough times, and enough times, and enough times, where he got comfortable with it. And it might have taken hundreds of calls to start getting comfortable with it. But then once he got comfortable with it, now the lingo and the tone and the fluency and the flow of those calls are second nature to him. And the same thing, I'm sure, for the agent that built that great book of business, $1 Million Book. The second thing I take from that is that he's a student. You can tell he's a student because he's been listening to me from afar for a while. So he mentioned to you how he will gather what I call sales intelligence. Yeah. He will gather sales intelligence. So he'll go out before he makes the call. He'll take 30 seconds, 60 seconds. He'll go on Google. He'll go on LinkedIn. He'll go somewhere online and he'll do a search for whether it be the industry or the company or the person, the vice president of a company, and he'll try to find some information on them. Maybe it comes from their LinkedIn profile. Maybe it comes from a press release. Maybe it comes from news on their website. Whatever the case may be, he's trying to gather one or two little nuggets that he can use as a way to create rapport. Because when he talks about, if he brought that up to me and said, yeah, I saw a press release where you guys just announced some new packaging or you launched a new product or whatever the case may be, that shows me that he's educated. He's taken the time to educate himself. So automatically, if everybody else was right here, he's automatically raised himself up the bar, in my opinion, because he's more educated than the average broker that's making that call. Now he's got to pivot in and use that as a segue to ask good questions and to continue to develop and build that rapport. And then from there, it's still a lot's going to fall into that, right? It's going to be timing. It's going to be, a lot of different variables are going to fall into whether he gets to quote them freight and whether he actually gets the business or not. But the point is you got to touch first. You can't steal second with your foot on first, right? You've got to get a little bit of a lead. And so I think those little things that he just talked about are the little things that make all the difference, right? I mean, those the little things, right? So that's amazing. I mean, that's just a very simple script. And just so you guys know, Blue Book is an organization that focuses around the produce industry. So they have like a membership and there's all kinds of membership benefits of that. And so he also uses that as the rapport builder because now all of a sudden he says, hey, we have that in common, right? We're both Blue Book members. We have this in common. That automatically, second, also builds rapport, right? And so you see how he's trying to create those comparables and he's trying to get them to bring their guard down by saying, hey, we're a Blue Book member. Ding, ding, ding. I'm a Blue Book member, so that's good. I read this article about you. Ding, 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 ding. This guy's educated. So all of a sudden now my guard starts to go down and I'm less likely to give him the good old Heisman and hang up on him, right? Or tell him we're not interested. So all he's doing is stacking the odds in his favor. And he's done a great job. And it's no surprise to me that his business is thriving. So couple more questions. If you could do it all over again, right? You go back to 2018 when you moved your first load, in January of 2018 when you moved your first load. If you could do it all over again, you could go back in time, what would be one thing, if you could change one thing or do one thing different, what would you do? I'm sure there's a ton of things because we all make tons of mistakes, but what's that one thing that comes to mind that, man, I really wish I would have done this, or I changed this, or not done this, right? Whatever the case may be. What would you have done differently to get further faster, right?
Yeah, that one thing will be understand very quickly that every company in my niche is not my potential customer. That's the one thing. That's the one thing that you need to understand very, very quickly. Okay. So one of the few mistakes that we make as a new broker is, we get on the sales call, we cold call people. 100 cold calls, 200 cold calls, or 300 cold calls in a week. Okay. Luckily, 1 or 2 shippers or 3 shippers will entertain you, will talk to you, and you will feel like, yes, this is my guy. This guy is gonna give me business. I'm gonna hold on to this guy. I'm gonna call this guy next week, or after 6 weeks, or after 6 months. I'm gonna hold on to this guy. This guy will give me business. Without qualifying the shipper, without knowing if the shipper has got credit, without knowing the volume, without knowing the margins, okay, you need to find all this, okay, before you hold on to a prospect.
And the way you do that, how do you do that?
Okay, so what we have 3 stages, okay, and these are the important stages for us to work with the customer. The first thing is the customer needs to be credit, okay. They should have credit. We don't want to work with the customer who does not have credit or who cannot pay us on time. That's very important to the business.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Second is they should have volume, and third, the margin. Okay. What we have seen is most of the customer will give you volume, but they will give you rates that are carrier rates. They will not give you broker rates. They will give you carrier rates. And you should understand very quickly that the rates that he is giving you are carrier rates, and maybe he wants to work with the carriers, or he has worked with the carriers, or he is already working with the carrier. That's why he's getting these rates. So if a customer is working with carrier, it's highly unlikely that you can find your way in, because he will always give you carrier rates unless and until he has a lot of loads, a lot of volume. Suppose he's moving 40 loads, 50 loads a week. In that case, he's using few carriers and then few brokers. Okay, then you can see volume and margins. But if there's a customer without credit, okay, without volume and without margin, we don't work with them.
It's not a customer at that point. If you can't provide enough value to that customer where you can make money and they can get what they want, it's not a customer. It's not an opportunity. So I love the way you broke that down. It's very simple, right? I mean, number one, they can have all the volume in the world, but if they don't have credit, guess what? It doesn't matter, because if they're not going to pay their bills on time or in a reasonable amount of time, it's a no-go. Because remember, guys, let's think about it. For every $1 million in invoices that you generate, okay, if you're making an average of 15% margins, just hypothetically, that means your receivables that you owe are $850,000 to your carriers versus $150,000 in gross profit, right? Yeah. So they have to pay their bills on time. This is a cash flow business. So that's the reason why a lot of people use factoring. They have receivables insurance. They check credit. The financial management piece is an important piece. It's not that hard once you have a little bit of a system, but I agree with you. I think that's smart. So what you would have done differently is you would have realized earlier that not every person that you talk to on the phone is actually a qualified prospect.
Yeah. Or can be a good customer to you. Okay, and can be volume and can be a value to you.
Yeah, and you have to ask, in order to ascertain those answers, you have to ask questions and you have to do some due diligence. So if you know,
Dennis, sometimes there's another thing that I've learned.
Oh, good.
Never take people at their face value.
Okay.
I have seen customers saying, I move 40 loads a week, I move 50 loads a week, but when you pull their credit, they have only $2,000 in volume.
Right.
So I never take anybody at their face value. It can be a carrier or shipper. Take them.
So how do you run credit? Like on produce companies, like you're in the produce niche. So let's say you have a conversation with somebody the first time and you get a nice little dialogue going. How do you run credit on them? What do you do to run credit on them, and where would it go from there?
We use services like Insonia, or we just talk to our factoring company and ask them if we can extend this guy credit. Okay, can we do business with them? We ask them questions. So that's when we realize that we should continue the conversation, or we should end the conversation here.
Yeah, so he mentioned one resource that you guys have for pulling credit. We use Dun & Bradstreet a lot. There's also Experian, but Ansonia, it's ANSONIA. We use them as well over the course of my brokerage. So that's another resource you can use for pulling credit, because I get that question all the time from people. How do I pull credit on shippers? How do I make sure they're going to pay their bills? And then the other side of it is, if you have a factoring company, they're going to run credit on all your clients. Trust me, they're going to run credit on all your clients. They want to make sure that they're not putting their capital at risk, even though, if it doesn't pay, you may or may not have to pay that back to them, recourse or non-recourse, depending upon how the factoring works. But no, that's awesome. And, and asking questions and then doing your due diligence. And what else? You had a couple other things you wanted to add.
There's another hack. Okay. For example, if somebody is starting out and does not, like many of us are not being approved by a factoring company, or factoring company will not give service to us. So somebody who doesn't have a factoring company and somebody who doesn't want to pay $10 every credit report can use another service, that is ITS, truck stop. So if you take a truck stop subscription, that is the top end subscription, in their portal there's a service wherein you can check shipper credit for free. If you want to pull credit, you have to pay $7 or $8, which is cheaper than Ansonia. But just to check credit, you can do it for free. So it will show you the credit score like 79, 80, and yeah, you'll have some idea before you pull the credit, or if you don't want to pull the credit, just to get an idea if I should do business with this customer.
Yeah, so it's like a pre-qualifier before you actually
pull full credit. Yeah, that's a hack. Okay, if you don't want to pay anything, this is how you use.
Yeah, so you have to have the top subscription to Internet Truck Stop, which you should have Internet Truck Stop anyway. And there's a whole suite of different tools and stuff in there. Obviously, Yogi has a large subscription, the main subscription, because he uses that as a primary tool for sourcing carriers and rating and all that sort of stuff. So listen, I want to thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure to finally actually meet you, right, where we're actually sitting here talking face to face. Congratulations on all your success. Thank you for taking all this time, because I know you're a busy guy. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. For those of you guys that are curious about becoming a freight broker, taking the course that kind of started Yogi off on his journey to building a 7-figure freight brokerage, go to freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Check that out. Again, we have a couple different memberships. The new membership is a platinum membership, which is a lifetime membership. We've never offered that before until recently. So it's a lifetime membership, lifetime support. You guys can check that out at freightbrokerbootcamp.com. Thank you guys for being here. We'll be back next week, Monday at noon, with another Freight Broker Live. Truly appreciate you being here. Congrats on all your success, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
All right, Dennis. Talk to you soon.
Thank you.